Welcome to Mooncast. I am Ada Pembroke,
And I'm Lauren from Tara and Chai.
and today we're going to be talking about the new moon in Pisces for March 2022. So, you want to jump into talking about the chart of the moment?
Sure. So this new moon is a little interesting because we've got a lot going on. We've got these nice clusters of planets going on. If you're looking at the chart of the moment, this is going to be for March 2nd at 11:34 a.m. That's Central Time. And if you want to kind of adjust that to your location, just take your time zone and adjust accordingly. You'll want um, the moon and the sun to be in the 10th house according to your location. So, what I'm looking at is we've got these three teams of planets. We've got the sun, moon, Jupiter, and Neptune all in Pisces in the 10th house. We've got the midheaven, Mercury, Saturn, all in Aquarius in the 9th, and Pluto, Mars, and Venus in Capricorn in the 8th. So it's kind of interesting because we've got all of these planets just, if we're looking at the zodiac kind of in order, where Aries is the beginning and Pisces at the end, it's shoved almost kind of towards the end of the zodiac. And so it feels like it's all over the place, but we've got this just really interesting concentration kind of all in that area.
Yeah, we've got these clusters, but it's like we've got this cluster of clusters. It's like um all of the planets, if you look at the chart, it looks like all of the planets have like inhaled helium and are like rising up to the top of the chart.
And I mean Jupiter's involved, so we've got that, definite kind of airiness going on there, so that might be what happened.
I can just imagine Jupiter and Neptune having an argument over who was going to bring the helium drugs.
Yeah, so
Um,
that oh go ahead.
and it's interesting because the chart of the moment has Gemini rising, so it has a really mercurial, like buzzy vibe in this chart. So the not only are the planets rising to the top of the chart like they've inhaled helium, they're talking as if they have inhaled helium as well, in a sense, that kind of chipmunk.
Yeah. Yeah, Mercury's pretty close. It's right on the, well, almost right on the midheaven there. Um but I think it's just kind of interesting because we have this huge influence of just almost you've got these two really contrasting energies going on, and Aquarius is just kind of almost stuck in the middle, as you've got this really disconnected, dreamy, kind of convoluted feeling that you get with all the stuff happening in Pisces. And then you've got this very driven, more earth oriented, grounding energy over there in Capricorn. And I say driven because Mars is over there, kind of, you know, we have an interesting party going on over there, putting it mildly.
Yeah, for sure. Mars and Pluto together, the god of death and the god of war. I don't think that that surprises anybody at the moment, but can only imagine how badly things would be going if Venus, the planet of peace, wasn't in on that party as well.
Yeah, if not for that kind of reining things in, I think we would. Yeah, I don't know what kind of state things would be in right now, honestly. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, just looking at the global situation right now, we're recording this during the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which has been going on for like the actual military action has been happening for a little less than a week. And so that Pluto, Mars, Venus thing definitely reflects that, in my opinion. War, death, but at the same time, you can see Venus there as everybody is rallying around Ukraine more or less, and all of the sanctions are happening, bringing in that Saturnian vibe. But um, there's also this sense of solidarity and this sense that you know there is less blaming big groups than I've seen during other conflicts. Like in the past, I would have expected to hear it being discussed as a conflict between the Russians and the Ukrainians. And all of the press, at least that I've been hearing, has been emphasizing the fact that the vast majority of the people involved want peace, but they're kind of like Venus being dragged along into this conflict that they don't actually want. And it's a new way of talking about war, I think, which kind of connects back to the fact that Venus is, or not Venus, Mercury is in Aquarius right now. I mean, Aquarius is the sign of the rebel and the innovator, and we've got the planet of communication, like being forward thinking and looking at this conflict from a detached position because it's in a different sign than the Pluto Mars Venus conjunction, while also being involved because it's right there with the ruler of that sign. So it's like, because Mercury, you were just mentioning that there's this relationship between Pisces and Capricorn, which astrologers call a sextile. And then Mercury and Saturn are kind of in the middle on their own in Aquarius. It's like that lack of involvement is giving them a bit of distance from the situation, almost an ability to comment from that um, rational, objective, Aquarian way of being in the world.
And I also kind of find it interesting just bringing Mercury into things, without spending too much more time on this. Um, we recently had it announced that even Switzerland was kind of jumping into things,
Mm-hmm.
which, historically they just haven't taken a stance on any of that and have remained largely neutral. But I think that Mercury in Aquarius is also very symbolic because you've got Mercury being about commerce and exchange and currency and that sort of thing. And with Aquarius being that kind of rebellious, innovative sign, um, they've decided to help kind of cut off their finances by, this sanctioning they've done.
I love that you're bringing in that side of it. That's something that I hadn't noticed, but you're totally right. I mean, all of the sanctions. Sanctions is definitely a Saturnine word because Saturn is all about placing limits. The sanctions are all about financial stuff. People are making statements. There are limits on the way that Russian sports teams are able to communicate their national identity in sporting events. Um, and then all, of course, all of the financial stuff, cutting Russia off from the larger world economy, very much mercurial limiting going on.
Yeah, and that was something that actually just kind of just now stuck out to me. But yeah, that's interesting the way that plays out, and very helpful because who knows where we'd be without that sort of at least a start to interference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Pisces and Capricorn, especially with Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces, it's almost like the conflict between war and peace.
Mhm.
Not that Capricorn is, highly combat oriented, but Mars and Pluto are there, and they are definitely combat oriented, and Capricorn has a bit of a competitive thing going on. So,
Yeah, and there's
um,
also that element of control.
mm-hmm. So it's almost like again that Aquarius mediating function. I mean, thank goodness we have the humanitarian side involved in this, right?
Yeah. And that could also be the role of Venus as well in these peace talks, because they,
Mhm.
keep getting pulled back for peace talks that we're hoping will go somewhere sometime soon.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but anyway, um, so as far as how we can kind of apply this chart to our personal lives, as I talked about earlier, if you cast this chart that we mentioned in the beginning for your local time, you should have the Pisces cluster of planets in your 10th house, or in the chart's 10th house, Aquarius in the ninth, and Capricorn in the 8th. So this is a good um, chart to kind of use for creative endeavors in the area of career and purpose. So the 10th house having the sun and the moon and Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces kind of brings that element of dreaming and creativity and being really to kind of drop all of the limits and bounds and just really step into that creative element.
I love
And
that you're bringing in the creative side there. Um, I want to Jupiterianly expand that a little bit. Something that I've been realizing because I'm going through a intensely 10th house time and have been for a while is that the 10th house isn't always about career. Like you're absolutely right to talk about it in terms of career, but I have the tendency to um, try to think of the 10th house as exclusively in terms of career. And one of the things that I've been realizing is that um, the association of the 10th house with public reputation is definitely something that I think is underemphasized in the astrology community.
mm-hmm,
Because my 10th house transits have been much less about my career and much more about how I appear to people who don't know me very well. And one of the forms that's taking that isn't deeply personal at the moment is the fact that you and I are taking a class on personal branding. And so, that's a career thing if it's a career thing, but like branding is all about 10th house stuff. It's all about how you appear to people who don't know you very well. So, if you're not feeling like you want to be doing things that have to do with your career, another way to think about it might be to start dreaming about a new way of being in the outer world. Like dreaming about your social media accounts, dreaming about redesigning your website, um, all of these things where you're interacting with the wider world, like going through some kind of big, you know, family change, like getting married or divorced that changes your relationship with the community based on your status. These are all 10th house things as well.
mm-hmm. And without going too much into like community and more like 11th house topics, you also have vocation, which can be like even just volunteer work or work you do, for your community. So it
Absolutely.
won't quite fall in the 11th house, and it's still got that very like purpose and vocation oriented 10th house feel.
For sure. What do you think of that Mercury Saturn conjunction in the ninth in this house or in this chart?
So normally I would be a little concerned about that, because that is a placement that I very much associate with writer's block. Um, in all honesty, um, but it's a bit more constructive. So we have a couple of things going on here. We've got the fact that Mercury is in a very strong position, because we've got Gemini on the ascendant, meaning Mercury is the ruler of this chart, and it's within 3 degrees of the midheaven. And so that gives it's also separating from Saturn by aspect. So it's not quite um, under this very like, yeah, just suffocating, limiting feel that you would normally have from Saturn. But Saturn is also in a place where it wants to be, so it might express itself a little more constructively than it usually would.
Hmm.
It's in its domicile in Aquarius, and it's also um, in this case, it's in a day chart, and it's just in a generally good place. So seeing that kind of, it might want to loosen its grip a little bit. So it's good for getting writing done, even if you don't necessarily want to do the writing. Because I feel like if
Hmm.
you were to do writing during this transit, even if you had to force yourself, it would still just flow.
You and I are both, we have a lot of experience with working with Saturn Mercury aspects because we both have difficult Saturn Mercury aspects in our chart. You have an opposition between Mercury and Saturn, and I have a quincunx, and yet we are both professional writers, and I think that that's really interesting.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that Mercury Saturn aspect plays out in your life and your writing practice?
So I think it does a couple of things, and sometimes those things aren't always good. But um, I was being born during the day and having my natal Saturn in Aquarius. Um, it's not in it's in a pretty good position, and it is constructive. Um, but it tends to I have Mercury and Leo in the 10th house, and so having I think it almost kind of reins it in. So where
Mm.
Leo might want to, only do what it wants to do and just, purely expressive writing, just it wants all eyes on the work, and it's only going to really get things done if it's in its element. I feel
Mm.
like Saturn kind of brings that healthy balance of no, you need to step back a little bit and, just orient this. Don't forget you're doing this for a living. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because we both have Mercury in fire signs. So you have yours in Leo, and I have mine in Aries. And I have found that for me, Saturn's influence is largely oriented toward keeping me from running my mouth. Like when I was a kid, I was constantly getting in trouble for things that I said. Like I did not get in trouble for anything else, only things that came out of my mouth. And so as an adult, it's like there's this, very stern critic figure who like sits in front of my mouth and is like, who are you going to offend by saying this? But
yeah.
also, like, I feel like it definitely brings the discipline in. I don't have a strong Saturn like you do. Mine is in Scorpio, though it is conjunct the South Node, which in evolutionary astrology gives it a certain kind of strength. Um, but I feel like that's in my particular instance, it's kind of a good thing because my Saturn is kind of policing everybody else, and having it be in somewhat less of a position of power means that I ever have any kind of spontaneity whatsoever, which I would not have if I had that same aspect system and Saturn was in Capricorn or Aquarius,
Yeah.
or heaven forbid, Libra.
Oh, yeah. And I do feel that a lot, because it is in a, very strong position. It does often contribute to my writer's block. Just because while it is generally cooperative, it can be very suffocating. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. I don't know if you experience it this way, but for me, it's like Saturn is always there telling me the things that I should write and kind of snuffing out the tender spark of inspiration. Like, I'll have an idea for something, I'll be like, "I should go off and write that." And then Saturn is like, "Yes, but you have a very long to-do list of things that you should be writing, and you have not written a single one of those things today."
Exactly. Yeah. And
So
that's
I find for me
also,
it's a balancing act.
yeah, very
Balancing
much
the
so.
Yeah, I mean, it must be for you because 'cause you've got that opposition, which is, like, literally a balancing act.
Hmm. But again, like at least I have the advantage of being able to find that common ground between the two, where
Mhm.
you said you're working more with the square, so it's like you don't really have as many options almost.
Oh, yeah, I mean, mine is a quincunx, which is even worse,
Or
but,
quincunx.
yeah, at least they're still ruled by Mars, which I have Mars in a day chart, so that's not really especially good news, but at least, they have the same boss even if he is a toughie.
Hmm.
So that's happening in the ninth house in the chart of the moment. So um, that means that writing disciplines oriented toward publishing or writing about religion, these are all subject areas that you might want to think about. I mean, this is a new moon, so things that we start around this time, whether we start them consciously or not, are going to be setting the tone for the next 6 months or so in the areas of life represented by the chart, especially that Pisces, because that's where the sun and moon are. So, this is a really excellent time for starting new writing practices or any kind of disciplined communication thing, or starting some kind of regular publication schedule, committing to something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, and especially with it being, yeah, just under the influence of Saturn, it's not going to be exceptionally great unless you're able to like find a way to kind of bring in those more Piscean energies um, for creative writing so much.
Hmm.
And also the reason I would not really suggest this for, divination or anything like that, which I would normally suggest for like big ninth house focuses. Um,
Hmm.
Unless, of course, you're doing divination for business, like maybe you have like a tarot spread you want to do for a new project you're working on or career or just something very constructive.
Hmm.
You might find a home for it there if you want to bring divination into it. Um,
Especially with Saturn there and Jupiter in the 10th.
yeah.
And the sun in the 10th as well. Both of them have connections with divination.
Hmm. And so I think that's where you can find a way to kind of marry the two and get them to work together a little better.
Definitely. What do you think people should do with the Pluto Mars Venus stellium in Capricorn in the 8th house?
I looked at that today and all I could think was, God, that's a hot mess. I'm like as someone with like lots of Capricorn placements, Mars has been sitting top of my moon, my natal Uranus
Mm.
and Neptune, and it's on top of my yeah, like I've got those planets going on down there.
How
Everything.
has that experience been for you? Like, what has it been like?
It's been incredibly overwhelming. Like I thought it was just going to be like this generally um I didn't expect it to be like a good transit because I started kind of looking at what other people were experiencing by transit early on, and
Mm.
there were so many complaints about like just the tension, the stress, a lot of those very Mars oriented topics, um, especially being kind of in an Earth sign where it's just like you're going to be dealing with this for a while because it Earth feels like very slow moving energy, and when you have like
Mhm.
a super intense planet like Mars and Pluto there, it's like you've got this prolonged feeling of very slow moving intensity, which is a terrible thing to deal with. Um, Especially since, stress has bad long term effects on, even physical things, the body.
Mhm.
Um, but for me, interestingly, and I think my saving grace was that, that conjunction with the moon, is I did get very emotionally wrapped up into it, but it expressed itself more as drive. Um, there
Mhm.
was lots of tension and stress there, but it was a good kind of stress. It was that driving kind of stress. Like, I've got all this stuff to do, and I was very productive early on until I got hit with COVID.
Oh,
So,
no.
um, but yeah, until I hit that wall, like, it was that was probably the most productive time I've had in like months. So it can kind of go either way. Either the stress is going to like really drive you and push you forward, and you're going to feel like really energized and excited about things, or the stress is just going to be so overwhelming that you're not quite sure what to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge with Mars together with Pluto and Capricorn. The only planet I have in Capricorn is Neptune at 2 degrees, and the way that um, Mars, Pluto, Venus being co present with that has just been like a slow motion panic attack where I feel like I can't see what's going on with like that Neptune fog. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's felt like driving on one of those like crazy California roads through like Big Sur or something where like you're driving along this ocean cliff and there's no guardrail, and if you fall off of it, it's like 100 feet down into the water where sharks are swimming, and like you can't see because it's foggy and your
Oh my
brights are
god.
stuck on.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. I can see that. And yeah, you had said you had recently taken a vacation to California, so I don't know if you did driving in any of those kinds of areas, but
A
oh.
little bit. It was definitely not foggy when I was driving in those areas though, but it definitely it definitely put that imagery very close to mind. Thank goodness the vacation itself was very relaxing though.
Yeah. But as far as where those planets are situated, we've got them here in the eighth house, which um, is on one hand a good thing if you're using this for elections and things that you generally want to get done, because the Mars and Pluto that are typically a bit more difficult to deal with are kind of hidden in the eighth house, even though
Hmm.
we're bearing Venus there too, so we can't really do anything with Venus. Um, but basically, that's just pretty much anything like contractual, especially if it's like work related and you want it to be constructive, is probably not going to go over very well here. um,
Shared finances. This might not be the best time to do your taxes since taxes rule the eighth house.
oh my god, yeah, no taxes, please.
Yeah,
No
maybe wait
taxes.
until Mars and Venus go into Aquarius. Is that going to happen before April 15th? Like, not that I want to encourage people to
Yes.
procrastinate on their taxes, but
Yeah, we actually have them moving into Aquarius in at sometime kind of middle-ish of March, right?
oh, so that's not too bad.
Yeah. So they'll be pretty soon.
Thank goodness.
I think oh my goodness, where did I hear it? I feel like it may have been in the March forecast for the astrology podcast, where either Austin or someone I was listening to on a podcast recently. I'm just gonna go ahead and say the astrology podcast because that's the first thing that comes to mind. And Austin is very good at painting this nice imagery.
He really
um,
is.
but somebody was talking about Mars and Venus kind of breaking free of Capricorn and moving into Aquarius, um, and it's almost like you have to kind of put them on a leash because they're these two little rambunctious children, like looking to just kind of cause chaos as they're moving out of this madness.
Oh,
So
it almost reminds me of like the hippies, you know, like we had this like really straight laced, under control, like a Cold War, terrifying post World War II 1950s, and then the 60s come, and it's like, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
It's like
um,
Mars and Venus go to Woodstock.
yes. Yeah, so we've
Which, you
got
know, if
them.
you have the time for that, isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. But having them move into this kind of more, air oriented sign is going to let us kind of work with them a little bit more, but also not really because um, and Mars is just, you really have to find a good place for that to find what you want to do with it because and I might also just be someone that finds Mars to be a challenging thing in general because of where it is in my chart, opposite
I
Pluto.
also find it challenging. I think you win for sure, Mars opposite Pluto, but at the same time, you also have like experience working with Mars Pluto aspects. So,
That's
like,
true.
we should all be sitting at your feet getting your instructions on how to deal with this lunation, really.
Yeah, so that's yeah, just like, I mean, this chart is a perfect example. Just sit there and bury it in either the eighth or the sixth house and hope it works out. um but yeah, as far as using this constructively, Mars and Pluto also bring a kind of drive and courage that we might not normally have. So, if we're thinking in terms of the
Mm.
eighth house, and being about things that are kind of below the surface, and we're associating that with things like trauma or things we don't want to talk about or things we've been keeping secret and not, really wanting to share or bring to the surface. Um, it might be a good time to use Mars and Pluto in a way, especially with Venus there, to kind of bring things that we've been struggling to work with to the surface and kind of face those head on.
I love that read of the eighth house. That is just perfect.
Thank you. Um, because I cannot think of anything else to do with it.
I mean, that sextile between Pisces and Capricorn, constructive dreaming. That's another potential way to work with it. Like, um, it's tricky being in the eighth and the 10th houses, um, but how can we pull our resources to manifest the dream that we have as humanity? That may be the most cosmic thing I've said all day. But I mean, we
Yeah.
can kind of see it playing out in the world. Like, yeah, humanity is pulling its resources to buy guns, Pluto and Mars, but there's definitely this kind of stone soup thing going on. Like, it's horrible. We're at war. I mean, not literally yet in the United States, at least, and hopefully things will be diffused before more people get pulled into the conflict. But there is still this sense in which humanity is coming together as a whole to say, this is the future that we want to live in, Aquarius, and how can we constructively um, come together to manifest that dream, Pisces and Capricorn. I think that if you want to work with this lunation in your own chart, looking at the house that has Capricorn and thinking about constructive ways in that area of your life where you might support the dreams that you have for the Pisces house in your area of your chart. So, um, for me, that, and I'm kind of thinking aloud here. I've got Capricorn in the sixth whole sign house, and I've got Pisces in the eighth whole sign house. So that's going to be about building routines and building health to support me in, my share of the shared resources in my family. So um, starting new things that um, build up my career. My 10th house isn't involved, but there still is the 10th house involvement in the chart of the moment. Um, and the sixth house is a career house as well. But kind of building career routines and daily routines that um, allow me to be a more financially contributing member in my primary relationship. How are you using this?
So for me, I am kind of trying to rein Neptune in a little bit, honestly. Because with all the transitions I've made recently, I
Mm.
do very much feel like I'm kind of floating in that dreamlike state. And I mean, it's very neutral. Like I'm kind of excited about what's going on, but at the same time, it's kind of overwhelming because I have absolutely no idea where things are going. And so we kind of bring
Mhm.
that fogginess back into things. And so while I have kind of free reign creatively, it's just, as someone with a lot of earth in their chart, going in a direction where you can't see things or really plan ahead is not very much not the norm. um,
My
so
Taurus sun knows exactly what you mean.
yes. So I'm kind of using it, one, to use dreaming as a way to kind of gain some clarity on things, so that maybe the answer doesn't lie so much in trying to look at what's going on in the outer world as much as it is trying to listen more to what your subconscious is telling you, especially with
Mm.
Neptune and Jupiter there.
Mhm.
Um, I think it is honestly kind of a more intangible uh, thing that I'm just not going to be able to plan for. So I just really have to like really intuit things. Um, so a lot of that, but I will also be doing lots of writing, not just because I am behind on work.
We're both behind on work and we both need to be doing a lot of writing. I
Yes.
basically spent the entire day writing a to-do list, and now I'm looking at the to-do list, and talk about overwhelm. Oh my goodness.
No. Yeah. So I
You
think
raise a really good point, I
okay.
think, about intuition. Both Pisces and Capricorn are introverted signs. They're more inwardly oriented. The inner world is the real world for these signs. And even though there is so much going on in the northern hemisphere in this chart, which normally means that there's a lot of support for making changes that are visible in the outer world. This is still a Pisces lunation, and Pisces is fundamentally about consciousness. So,
Mhm.
this is a really good lunation for looking at your dreams or your nightmares, if your dreams are anything like mine lately. And, like, yeah,
Yeah.
building the structures internally, maybe less than, you know.
Well, and what you mentioned earlier, we're both going through that branding course, Branding and Magic by Chris Ann, if you're familiar with the Lightseers Tarot. She's doing this amazing workshop that is very creative and kind of dreamy, and it's very much about kind of getting your internal ideas and feelings about things into a more visual form. So I think that's also a really kind of fitting way to work with the lunation. It's just what we're doing with that course right now.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've never made a dream board before, this is the lunation to make a dream board. Like,
Mm-hmm.
seriously.
Yeah, and I think it actually really constructively ties in all of the elements in this lunation because we have that mercurial side of things where you are, well, both Mercury and Saturn, where you're finding a way to communicate that with other people in the form of branding.
Hmm.
And it is kind of more business oriented, which brings in Saturn. And
Yep.
then we've got that kind of Capricorn focus that we are really kind of having to dig pretty deep for, ideas and all the thoughts that we've just kind of set to the side and not really revisited. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's really bringing in everything in those three signs together quite well.
Gold star for us then. So, unless you feel like there's more you want to say about this lunation, I feel like you just wrapped it up incredibly well. Um, do you have anything that you have going on that you want people to know about?
Well, before I say that, I would say the last thing I do want to say about this chart is if you are using this for elections, um, one thing we didn't talk about was yes, new moons are wonderful for planning, and everything going on in the ninth house being great for publishing. New moons are also not a time to really initiate things because the moon is dark
Mm,
and things aren't going anywhere, and it's very much our own internal personal work. So if you are using this as an electional chart, you just kind of want to make sure the sun and moon are separating, which it's literally just bumping this chart forward about 10 to 15 minutes so that
right.
the moon is no longer completely dark. And that's all it is. So if you want to use it for planning, keep it as is. If you want to use it for initiating anything and like outreach or anything like that, just bump it forward about 10-15 minutes because that does make all the difference in the world. Actually. um, so yeah, that's
don't
it.
don't jump the gun, in other words.
Exactly.
That's something that I've been learning a lot recently. Don't decide what a transit is about until the thing has actually happened.
Yes. Especially where Neptune is involved.
Oh my goodness, yes.
um, but yeah, as far as stuff that I have going on, I am very slowly opening my readings again. Um,
Woo!
I have not wanted to commit to any because I've been dealing with lots of craziness, but I actually have time opening up my schedule again soon. So I will have time on my calendar again.
That's fantastic. And I my thing to announce is also that I am open for readings. My calendar is actually disturbingly clear right now. So if you're listening to this podcast and you would like a reading from me, you can use the discount code 50% and like spell out 50% to get a 50% off discount on readings from me. So I'm booking 2 weeks in advance, but you can use that discount code anytime in the next month or so for whenever you want to book a reading.
Alrighty, and I think that's everything for me.
Awesome, me too. And for the people who are listening to this, I hope that you have wonderful dreams.
Thank you all so much for tuning in.
Bye.